You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Now let's get to the conference matchups, okay? You got at Clemson, Duke, at SMU, Pitt, at Georgia Tech, North Carolina, at Miami, Boston College. That is in order in which they will play those teams. The projected quarterbacks, all right? You got Clemson, Cade Klubnik, Duke, Darian Mensah, SMU, Kevin Jennings, Pitt, Eli Holstein, Georgia Tech, Haynes King. North Carolina, it's a big quarterback competition there between Max Johnson, Gio Lopez, and Bryce Baker. Miami, you got Carson Beck. And Boston College, you got Grayson James. I do wish it was Thomas Castellanos because he stinks and he's running his mouth at Florida State, and he is due for a really, really bad season there. But I'm only going to talk about 5 of these quarterbacks because we got 8 of them here, and we don't have all day here on this podcast. But for the most part, top to bottom, these are some really high-quality quarterbacks that Syracuse is facing. But the toughest quarterback that Syracuse is projected to face, at least for right now, is Cade Klubnik. And feel free to agree or disagree with me right now in the comments section below. I think Cade Klubnik is the toughest quarterback that Syracuse will face in the ACC this upcoming season, and in general, actually. Even if you include the non-conference quarterbacks as well, Cade Klubnik is the best quarterback that Syracuse is scheduled to face. An upset over Clemson on the road is going to be really difficult. I'm just going to tell you all right now how it is. It's going to be really hard for Syracuse to go into Clemson and actually win that game. Now, funny enough, Syracuse does have a history of going into Clemson and actually keeping it very close. They did it a couple of years ago, actually when Cade Klubnik entered the game in the third quarter. Remember that one? Syracuse should have won that game. A few years before that, Syracuse nearly knocked off Trevor Lawrence over there. So Syracuse has a history of kind of keeping it close in Clemson. But regardless, Cade Klubnik, I doubted him at the start of 2024, but he was terrific in 2024. His first full year starting was 2023. 13 games, 64% completion rate, 2,800 yards, 19 touchdowns, 9 picks. Didn't do much rushing either. Those aren't necessarily bad numbers in 2023 for Klubnik. But at Clemson, those are game manager numbers. With the amount of talent that they produce year in and year out, if your quarterback is giving you game managing numbers at Clemson, then you really probably don't have a good quarterback. But in 2024, he shut me up and he shut up a lot of critics out there with his play. 14 games, 63% completion again, 3,600 passing yards, 36 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. So that's a touchdown-interception ratio of 6-1 for Cade Klubnik last season. Also, he can scramble. He's a threat with his legs. Over 450 rushing yards last season and 7 rushing touchdowns. And if all goes according to plan, Cade Klubnik is going to be a first-round pick in the 2026 NFL Draft. With Clemson, usually, in fact, over the past 15 years, they have had more talent, top to bottom, than Syracuse football. It's just, I'm sorry, I'm a Syracuse fan, I'm a Syracuse alum. I would love for Syracuse to always beat Clemson and all that fun stuff. They have beat them before. Remember that big upset? With Dino Babers, I should say. It wasn't with Fran Brown or anything, but that did happen. But regardless, Clemson has more talent. They are pretty much better at every single position group than Syracuse. But the way where Syracuse could have a chance of an upset is if Clemson's quarterback is making mistakes. Remember DJ a few years ago when Syracuse went to Clemson, he did not play well. He didn't. And it gave Syracuse a chance. The year before that, DJ didn't play well when he came to the Dome. And it gave Syracuse a chance at an upset. But if Clemson's quarterback is on his game, I don't see how Syracuse has any sort of chance at winning unless they could somehow manage a 51-45 type win. And with Cade Klubnik, the odds of catching him on an off day appears unlikely as opposed to what I would have said last season, which is, hey, maybe you could catch him on an off day. Maybe he's not playing well, and all of a sudden you have a chance. But with Clemson, with Cade Klubnik, sorry, that is such a tongue twister. I apologize. It's very hard to envision Syracuse winning that game. But who else is Syracuse facing in the ACC? You got Darian Mensah, over at Duke, a two-lane transfer with 3 years of eligibility remaining, so he has a potential to be a nightmare against Syracuse for years to come and in the ACC. Duke opened the vault for him in the transfer portal this offseason, and he's coming off a strong year at Tulane. Played 13 games, 66% completions, really high, 2,700 yards, 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Do not underestimate the Duke Blue Devils in the ACC. They are one of the sneaky dark horses in the conference this upcoming season. If you tell me right now that Duke is going to be in the ACC title game, I would not be surprised. Darian Mensah is a big part of that. Georgia Tech, you got Haynes King last year of eligibility. Syracuse has seen Haynes King before, both in 2023 and in 2024. And Syracuse is 1-1 against him. In fact, of the 5 quarterbacks that I am mentioning here, he's the only one that Syracuse faced last season. To me, Haynes King, I want to say this without actually calling him this. When I watch him play, and maybe you feel the same way or maybe you feel differently, I think of him as the college version of Josh Allen with the Buffalo Bills. I'm not saying Haynes King is as good as Josh Allen. I'm not saying Haynes King is going to be a first-round pick or anything like that. He's certainly talented, but he's a big quarterback, 6'3", 215 pounds, and even then, he plays bigger than what he is listed at, because he's one of the best running quarterbacks in the country. He's a very mobile guy, and also he improved his completion percentage a year ago at 73%. Dark horse player to win the Heisman. I'm not going to pick him to win the Heisman Trophy, but he is definitely a dark horse because if he has a big year, he could combine for 40 touchdowns and 4,000 yards. And if you have 4,000 total yards and 40 touchdowns, you might find yourself in New York City at the end of the season. And so in order for Syracuse to beat a team like Georgia Tech and Haynes King, they're really going to have to hold the edges, keep Haynes King in the pocket, and hope that he makes a couple of mistakes over the middle of the field or something like that. You got Kevin Jennings with 2 more years of eligibility as well over at SMU. He didn't begin the 2024 season as the starting quarterback there. It was actually Preston Stone, who's at Northwestern. But when Jennings took over as the full-time starter, he did quite well, and he was a big reason why SMU went to the college football playoff last season. He's also another dual-threat guy. If you're not careful, he had 100 rushing yards against Louisville last season. So those are, I think, the 4 best quarterbacks that Syracuse will face in the ACC. You got Cade Klubnik over at Clemson, Darian Mensah over at Duke, you got Georgia Tech's Haynes King, and you got Kevin Jennings at SMU. But then there's a big question mark, and it's the final quarterback we'll talk about here in this segment from the ACC, okay? Carson Beck over at Miami. He is fascinating. He could have a Kyle McCord type year. And by that, I mean, here's the deal with Carson Beck. He had a really strong 2023 at Georgia, and it led a lot of people to believe that he'd be the number 1 pick after the 2024 season in the NFL draft. He would leave college, he would go directly to the NFL, be the number 1 pick like Cam Ward was, and go on to have a great NFL career. But that's not exactly what happened. Carson Beck, at least statistically, he got worse in 2024 compared to 2023, and he left the Georgia program. He transferred. And it's one of those scenarios to me where I still think Carson Beck is really good. In fact, I think Carson Beck is the second best quarterback in the ACC because even though he might not have lived up to expectations as his number 1 pick, it's not like he's bad or anything. He's still really good. It's kind of like, again, Kyle McCord at Ohio State. Yeah, he didn't live up to the guys before him, but he was still really good at Ohio State. The issue was that they didn't really necessarily see it that way because they're used to something even better than what Kyle McCord gave them. The issue, though, with Carson Beck is that he's coming off elbow surgery on his throwing elbow. So health is the big concern with Carson Beck. Now, by the time Syracuse faces Miami, which is the back half of the regular season, we'll know a lot more about Carson Beck and his elbow. But I just want to mention him because I think he's the second best quarterback that Syracuse will face all year if he's healthy. But I don't know if he's going to be healthy. And if he's not healthy, well, that's not going to be good for Miami. It would be good for Syracuse, though.